That sermon I shared with you all last September on the history of book banning. And time again, this book showed up on the various list of banned books that I was reviewing. And I thought, dang, it must be good, right? I mean, it keeps showing up. And I was right. Now, this is a YA book. That means that the target audience is preteens through adults. And y'all, I'm 73 years old, but I found it to be totally awesome. Now, I'd already read the book and put it on the program schedule when I found out that once again, the author of this great book had gotten into some trouble with folks. It seems like most of them do one time or another, say something or whatever to get, well, this one did too. More specifically, he got caught up in the Me Too movement, which had revelations from various women. It seems his long ago ex-girlfriend, who had been in a consensual relationship with him before he got married, got an email from another woman saying that Sherman had sexually harassed her. So this ex put out on social media that if others had been sexually harassed by Sherman, to let her know, and they could do that confidentially, and she publicized it. Thankfully, unlike Rowling, who doubled down defending her transphobic remarks, Sherman not only admitted that he had made mistakes in how he interacted with women in the past, but he also canceled the upcoming release of his paperback of his memoir. It was all out. It was already out in hardback, but most of the sales come when it's released in paperback. He canceled it. It's still not out in paperback. I listened to the Audible, and it's an excellent memoir, but he still never did release the paperback. And he also turned down an award that he had gotten for that book. So that's good. Anyway, back to this book. It's kind of a semi-autobiographical book in which the author chronicles the contemporary adolescence of one unlucky boy trying to rise above the life that everyone expects for him to live. It's written in the form of a diary, so it's all first person. And that person is the character of Arnold Spirit. Arnold Spirit, also known as Junior. He's a member of the Spokane Indian Reservation. He was born with a variety of medical problems that he describes in his first entry of the diary. As I share lessons from this book, it's going to be mostly about lessons Arnold learned, or Junior, as he was called when on the reservation, that Arnold or Junior learns, but these are also lessons for all of us. And as I share these lessons, I'm going to be quoting heavily from the book because his writing style is what's perhaps so captivating. So I'll be swapping between Arnold's voice, as is in his diary, and my own voice. And I have a cap. Here's my cap. This cap is similar to the one that Arnold's Uncle Eugene may have worn. His Uncle Eugene was part of a motorcycle riding group. So I cut that out and put that on there. It's a writer's group. So when I'm speaking as Arnold, I will put on this cap, okay? And when I have it off, it's Jane. So here's from the first entry, Arnold's first entry. I was born with water on the brain. Okay, so that's not exactly true. I was actually born with too much cerebral spinal fluid inside my skull. But cerebral fluid is just a doctor's fancy way of saying brain grease. Yeah. And the brain grease works inside the lobes like car grease in an engine, It keeps things running smooth and fast. Well, weird on me, I was born with too much grease inside my skull, and it got all thick and muddy and disgusting, and it mucked up the works. My thinking and breathing and living engine slowed down, and it just got flooded with the brain grease. My brain was drowning in grease. But it's more poetic to say I was born with water on the brain. I was only 6 months old and was supposed to croak during the surgery. And even if I survived, I was supposed to have serious brain damage during the vacuuming procedure and live the rest of my life as a vegetable. Well, obviously, I survived the surgery, or I wouldn't be writing this. But I have all sorts of physical problems, and these are directly the result of my brain damage. Arnold goes on to share some of these, including 10 extra teeth that crowded his mouth, and he had to wait forever for the Indian Health Service to fund the major dental work. Yeah, they also funded eyeglasses. He was very farsighted in one eye, very nearsighted in the other. They funded eyeglasses once a year, and they only offered those thick, black plastic, ugly ones. He started wearing them when he was 3. He also was skinny, and he had big feet and a huge round skull. Plus, he had seizures, which caused even more brain damage. And he had a stutter and a lisp. He got called lots of names, and he got beat up a lot. Beat up a lot. So he spent a lot of time indoors at home reading books and drawing cartoons. The one on the screen is the first one that was taped into his diary. He draws because he thinks it can deliver messages that words cannot, and because he's good at it. And the lesson he's learned, looking at the world so far, is that drawing may be his only way to succeed. Here's Arnold. I draw because I want to talk to the world, and I want the world to pay attention to me. I feel important with a pen in my hand. I feel like I might grow up to be somebody important. An artist, maybe a famous artist, maybe a rich artist. That's the only way I can become rich and famous. Just take a look at the world. Almost all of the rich and famous brown people are artists. They're singers and actors and writers and dancers and directors and poets. So I draw because I feel it might be my only real chance to escape the reservation. I think the world is a series of broken dams and floods, and my cartoons are like tiny lifeboats. Here is a lesson from the book that we can learn about what it feels like to be poor and a minority. Arnold has a dog named Oscar, and he loves Oscar. Oscar becomes sick, and he's in a lot of pain. But of course, they can't take the dog to the vet. Here's Arnold's description of what it's like to be poor. It sucks to be poor. And it sucks to feel you somehow deserve to be poor. You start believing that you're poor because you're stupid and ugly. And then you start believing you're stupid and ugly because you're an Indian. And because you're an Indian, you start believing you're destined to be poor. It's an ugly circle, and there's nothing you can do about it. Poverty doesn't give you strength or teach you lessons about perseverance. No, poverty only teaches you how to be poor. So small and weak, I picked up Oscar. He licked my face because he loved and trusted me. And I carried him out to the lawn and laid him down under our green apple tree. I love you, Oscar, I said. He looked at me, and I swear he understood what was happening. He was relieved, but not me. I ran away from there as fast as I could, but nobody, no matter how fast they can run, can't run that fast. So I heard the boom of my father's rifle when he shot my best friend. A bullet only costs about 2 cents, and anybody can afford that. Now, a lesson that Arnold learned about what will get your book banned. No, excuse me, that's not Arnold. A lesson the author, Sherman Alexie, learned about what will get your book banned. Okay? Not that he cares, because it probably added to the sales of it, right? Like Judy Blume said, every time one of her books was banned, the sales went up. But here is the passage in Arnold's diary that is most often reported as disturbing for parents and others who call for it to be taken off of the library shelves. Here is Arnold sharing about his first day of high school on the reservation. Oops. I was 14, and it was my first day of high school. I was happy about that. And I was most especially excited about my first geometry class. Yep, I have to admit that isosceles triangles make me feel hormonal. Most guys, no matter what age, get excited about curves and circles, but not me. Now, don't get me wrong. I like girls and their curves, and I really like women and their curvier curves. I spend hours in the bathroom with a magazine that has 1,000 pictures of naked movie stars. That's right. Yes, I admit that I masturbate. I'm proud of it. I'm good at it. I'm ambidextrous. If there were a professional masturbators league, I'd get drafted #1 and make millions of dollars. And maybe you're thinking, well, you shouldn't be talking about masturbation in public. Well, tough. I'm going to talk about it because everybody does it and everybody likes it. If God hadn't wanted us to masturbate, he wouldn't have given us thumbs. I thank God for my thumbs. And Arnold goes on to talk about how he also loves right angles. He tells a little about Mr. P, his weird geometry teacher, who Arnold thinks must be teaching at the reservation school because he's so lonely. And he says that lonely white people tend to hang out with even lonelier Indians. The textbooks are passed out and he opens it to read at the top. This book belongs to Agnes Adams. Well, Agnes Adams was his mother. Adams was her maiden name. And he realizes how old and decrepit the books are at their school. And it makes him mad. So mad that he throws it at Mr. P and hits him in the eye and ends up getting suspended from school. His family was ashamed. He was ashamed. And then he was surprised when he saw Mr. P walking up their driveway with a big bandage on his eye about a week into Arnold's suspension. And this leads to a lesson Arnold learns from Mr. P about what he should do with his life. After a long silence, followed by a conversation in which Mr. P reveals that before Arnold's sister started living in the basement of their home and not coming out after high school, she was the smartest student in school and wanted to be a writer. But she slowly gave up that possibility and reduced herself to being alone. He also opened Arnold's eyes to his own abilities as the smartest kid in school and someone who had persevered so much. Then he asked him to promise that he would never tell what he was going to say next. Mr. P leaned over so even the trees couldn't hear. And he told Arnold that he would have to leave the reservation. I'll let Arnold take it from here. If you stay on this res, Mr. P said, they're going to kill you. I'm going to kill you. We're all going to kill you. You can't fight us forever. I don't want to fight anybody, I said. You've been fighting since you were born, he said. You fought off that brain surgery. You fought off all those seizures. You fought off the drunks and the drug addicts. You kept your hope. And now you've got to take your hope and go somewhere other people have some hope. I was starting to understand. He was a math teacher. I had to add my hope to somebody else's hope. I had to multiply hope by hope. Where is hope? I asked. Who has hope? Son, Mr. P said, you're going to find more and more hope the further and further you walk away from this sad, sad, sad reservation. Next is a lesson that Arnold learned about the support of his parents. So Arnold listened to Mr. P, and he made a plan. Here's the conversation he had with his parents when he got home. Who has the most hope? I asked. Mom and Dad looked at each other. They studied each other's eyes. You know, like they had antennas. They were sending back radio messages back and forth to each other. And then they looked back at me. Come on, I said. Who has the most hope? White people, my parents said at the same time. That's exactly what I thought they were going to say. So I said the most surprising thing they had ever heard from me. I want to transfer schools, I said. You want to go to Hunter's? Mom said. It's another school on the west end of the reservation, filled with poor Indians and even poorer white kids. Yes, there is a place where the white people are poorer than the Indians. No, I said. I want to go to Reardon. Reardon is the rich white farm town that sits in the wheat fields of exactly 22 miles away from the res. And it's a hick town, I suppose, filled with farmers and rednecks and racist cops who stop every Indian that drives through. During one week when I was little, Daddy got stopped 3 times for a DWI. That's driving while Indian. But Reardon has one of the best small schools in the state, with a computer room and a huge chemistry lab and a drama club and 2 basketball gyms. The kids in Reardon are the smartest and most athletic kids anyway. They are the best. I want to go to Reardon, I said again. I couldn't believe I was saying it. For me, it seemed as real as saying I want to fly to the moon. Are you sure? My parents asked. Yes, I said. When do you want to go? My parents asked. Right now? I said, tomorrow. If I don't go now, I never will. I have to do it now. Okay, they said. My parents love me so much they want to help me. Yeah, Dad is a drunk and Mama is an ex-drunk, but they don't want their kids to be drunks. Arnold's parents do let him know that it'll be hard to get him there since there's no bus. And that since he's the first to leave the res this way, that the other Indians will be angry. They let him know the difficulties, and they still agree Arnold can go. Arnold gets a heartbreaking rejection when he tries to convince his best friend Rowdy to go with him. Rowdy starts screaming and punching him and gives Arnold a nosebleed and calls him names. When Arnold got back up off the ground, he realized that his best friend had then become his worst enemy. So Arnold heads off to Reardon. Sometimes, if his dad was sober, he would take him. Sometimes his Uncle Eugene would take him on the back of his motorcycle. Sometimes he would hitchhike, many times, and a few times he had to walk all the way. At Reardon High, the first thing he had to change was the name he went by, because those teachers were going to call him by his given name, not Junior, and he accepts that. Just one of the many changes in his life. It wasn't easy. Wasn't easy. Though they were an all-white school, till Arnold came, their mascot was an Indian. And they initially treated him like a mascot, calling him names like Chief and Sitting Bull, Tonto, Redskin, and more. So it was a lonely time for Arnold. But like Mr. P said, Arnold was resilient, and he found out that it wasn't all bad. He discovered some good things about that awful time. I'll let him tell you about it himself. First of all, I learned that I was smarter than most of those white kids. Oh, there were a couple of girls and one boy who were like little Einsteins. There was no way I'd be smarter than them. But I was way smarter than 99% of the others. And not just smart for an Indian, okay? I was smart, period. Let me give you an example. In geology class, the teacher, Mr. Dodge, was talking about petrified wood. There was some forest near George Washington on the Columbia River. And he was talking about how it was pretty amazing that wood could turn into rock. I raised my hand. Yes, Arnold, Dodge said. He was surprised. That was the first time I'd raised my hand in class. I said, yeah, I was so articulate. Spit it out, Dodge said. Well, I said, petrified wood is not wood. My classmates stared at me. They couldn't believe that I was contradicting a teacher. If it's not wood, Dodge said, why do they call it wood? I don't know. I said, I didn't name the stuff, but I know how it works. Dodge's face was red, hot red. I've never seen an Indian look that red, so why do they call us redskins? Okay, Arnold, if you're so smart, Dodge said, then you tell us how it works. Well, what happens is when you have wood that's buried under the dirt, then minerals and stuff get into it. They soak into it and melt the wood and the glue that holds the wood together. And then the minerals sort of take the place of the wood and the glue. I mean, the minerals keep the same shape as the wood. You see, the wood has not turned into rocks. The rocks have replaced the wood. Dodge stared hard at me. He was dangerously angry. Okay, Arnold, Dodge says, where did you learn this fact? On the reservation. Yes, we know all that about the science that's on the reservation. My classmates snickered, except for one, Gordy, the class genius. He raised his hand. Gordy, Dodge said, all happy and relieved and stuff. I'm sure you can tell us the truth. Actually, Gordy said, Arnold is right about the petrified wood. That's what happens. Arnold goes on to share how Mr. P goes from blood red to snow white, and shares that Mr. P is not a real science teacher. That in small schools, if the real science teacher quits, they just put someone else in the class. And that is why small town kids sometimes don't know the truth about petrified wood. Mr. Dodge thanks Gordy, but he doesn't say anything to Arnold. Eventually, though, Gordy, who is too smart and different for most folks to want to associate with, accepts Arnold's invitation to become his friend. That's not the only friend Arnold makes. He actually gets a girlfriend. the beautiful and popular Penelope, and her accepting him as her boyfriend makes him popular. But Penelope has a problem. She's bulimic. Together they learned about dreaming and overcoming limitations. Arnold includes this conversation and his thoughts about Penelope in this excerpt from his diary. "Arnold," she said one day after school, "I hate this little town. It's so small, too small. Everything about it is small. The people here have small ideas, small dreams. They want to marry each other and live here forever." "What do you want to do?" I asked. "I want to leave as soon as I can. I think I was born with a suitcase." Yeah, she talked like that, all big and goofy and dramatic. I wanted to make fun of her, but she was so earnest. "Where do you want to go?" I asked. "Everywhere. I want to walk on the Great Wall of China. I want to walk to the top of the pyramids in Egypt. I want to swim in every ocean. I want to climb Mount Everest. Oh, I want to go on an African safari. I want to ride in a dog sled in Antarctica. I want all of it, every single piece of everything." Her eyes got this strange, faraway look, like she'd been hypnotized. I laughed. "Don't laugh at me," she said. "I'm not laughing at you. I was laughing at your eyes." "That's the whole problem," she said. "Nobody takes me seriously." "Oh, well, come on. It's kind of hard to take you seriously when you're talking about the Great Wall of China and Egypt and stuff. Those are just big, goofy dreams. They're not real." "They're real to me," she said. "Why don't you quit talking in dreams and tell me what you really want to do with your life? Make it simple." "I want to go to Stanford and study architecture." "Wow, that's cool," I said. "But why architecture?" "Because I want to build something beautiful, and because I want to be remembered." And I couldn't make fun of her for that dream because it was my dream too. And Indian boys weren't supposed to dream like that, and white girls from small towns weren't supposed to dream like that either. We're supposed to be happy with our limitations. But there was no way Penelope and I were going to sit still. Nope, we both wanted to fly. "You know," I said, "I think it's way cool that you want to travel the world, but you won't even make it halfway if you don't eat enough." She was in pain, and I loved her, sort of loved her, I guess. So I had to love her pain too. Arnold learned a lot of other things at Reardon High School from teachers, from the Einstein kid Gordy, his basketball coach, and other players, especially Roger, excuse me. Rowdy was the guy and his friend in the reservation, especially Roger. That was the guy he played basketball with. But he also learned from his own family back on the reservation. That's why he says he's a part-time Indian. Goes to Reardon School, goes back to the reservation. Arnold shares a lesson that he learned from his beloved grandmother. "My grandmother's greatest gift was tolerance. Now, in the old days, Indians used to be forgiving of any kind of eccentricity. In fact, weird people were often celebrated. Epileptics were often shamans because people just assumed that God gave seizure visions to the lucky ones. Gay people were seen as magical too. I mean, like in many cultures, men were viewed as warriors and women were viewed as caretakers. But gay people, having some male and female, were seen as both warriors and caregivers. Gay people could do anything. They were like Swiss Army knives. My grandmother had no use for all the gay bashing and homophobia in the world, especially among other Indians. Geez, she says, who cares if a man wants to marry another man? All I want to know is who's going to pick up all the dirty socks. Of course, ever since white people showed up and brought along their Christianity and their fears of eccentricity, Indians have gradually lost all their tolerance. Indians can be just as judgmental and hateful as anybody. But not my grandmother. She still hung up on that old time Indian spirit, you know. She always approached each new person as a new experience, the exact same way. Whenever we went to Spokane, my grandmother would talk to anybody, even the homeless people, who were talking to the invisible people. My grandmother would talk to the invisible people too. Why would she do that? Well, she said, how can I be sure there aren't invisible people in the world? So I thought about that one. Arnold said that everybody loved his grandmother, everybody. He also shares in his diary entry that while she was walking back from a powwow at the Spokane Tribal Community Center the week before, she was struck and killed by a drunk driver. That wasn't the only death Arnold experienced his freshman year. His uncle Eugene, the one that sometimes took him to school on his motorcycle, and his sister both died tragically. So much grief for a 14-year-old boy. And on top of trying to adjust to living in two worlds. He tells a story about something that happened at his grandmother's wake, where about 2,000 people showed up. They had to move it to the football stadium. I don't have time to tell you that story, but it really struck him to be so very laughable. And he started laughing, and his mother laughed. And all 2,000 Indians started laughing as well. And it taught him a lesson about grief. Here's part of Arnold's entry. We kept laughing. It was the most glorious noise I had ever heard. And I realized that, sure, Indians were drunk and sad and displaced and crazy and mean, but dang, we knew how to laugh. When it comes to death, we know that laughter and tears are pretty much the same thing. And so, laughing and crying, we said goodbye to my grandmother. And when we said goodbye to one grandmother, we said goodbye to all of them. Every funeral was a funeral for all of us. We lived and died together. And all of us laughed when they lowered my grandmother into the ground. And all of us laughed when they covered her with dirt. And all of us laughed as we walked and drove and rode our way back to our lonely, lonely houses. That lesson reminded me of the reading I sometimes share at memorial services by Khalil Gibran, the one that talks about, in the Prophet, the one that talks about joy and sorrow going hand in hand. There are many other lessons that Arnold learned that are lessons for us as well, but I want to close with an excerpt from his final entry. It's about friendship. It's about his old friend turned enemy, Rowdy, from the reservation, coming back to his house the summer after his freshman year of high school. And they had not spoken since that nosebleed situation. And Arnold asked him why he's there. Rowdy says because he's bored. They share a few insults and laughs. And Rowdy asks him if he wants to go shoot some hoops. And so they walk down to the old court behind the school and take turns shooting and rebounding for one another, still insulting and laughing. Here's that final excerpt. You want to go one-on-one? Rowdy asked. Yeah. Where are you going to school next year? I asked. Where do you think, dumbass? Right here, where I've always been. How come you don't come to Reardon with me? You already asked me that once. Yeah, but I asked you that a long time ago, before everything happened, before we knew stuff. So I'm asking you again, come to Reardon with me. Rowdy breathed deeply. For a second, I thought he was going to cry, but he didn't. You know, he said, I was reading this book about old-time Indians and how we used to be nomadic. Yeah, I said. So I looked up nomadic in the dictionary, and it means people who move around and keep moving around in search of food and water and grazing land. That sounds about right, I said. Well, the thing is, I don't think Indians are nomadic anymore. Most Indians, anyway. No, we're not, I said. I'm not nomadic, Rowdy said. Hardly anybody on this res is nomadic, except for you. You are the nomadic one. Whatever. No, I'm serious. I always knew you were going to leave. I always knew you were going to leave us behind and travel the world. I had this dream about you a few months ago. You were standing on the Great Wall of China. You looked happy, and I was happy for you. Rowdy didn't cry, but I did. You're an old-time nomad, Rowdy said. You're going to keep moving all over the world in search of food and water and grazing land, and that's pretty cool. I could barely talk. Thank you, I said. Yeah, Rowdy said. Just make sure you send me postcards, you asshole. From everywhere, I said. I would always love Rowdy. I would always miss him too, just as I would always miss my grandmother and my big sister and Eugene. Just as I would always love and miss my reservation and my tribe. I hoped and prayed that they would someday forgive me for leaving them. I hoped and prayed that I would someday forgive myself for leaving them. "Aw, man," Rowdy said, "stop crying." Then he threw me the ball. "Now quit your blubbering," he said, "and play ball." I wiped my tears away, dribbled once, twice, and pulled up for a jumper. Rowdy and I played one-on-one for hours. We played until dark. We played until the street lights lit up the court. We played until the bats swooped down near our heads. We played until the moon was huge and golden and perfect in the night sky. We didn't keep score. And those are some lessons, my friend, from the absolutely true diary of a part-time Indian.